So tonight we have Evan Bissonette. I've been corrected on the E for his name tonight, and he is presenting on how technologists and business-focused teammates find synergy. So it is all yours, Evan. And
all right, cool.
So, how do you feel about questions?
100%. So this is not like a slide heavy presentation. It might not even be something that you guys are used to talking about, frankly, in your roles, but that's kind of why I thought it might be potentially interesting, is because a lot of us probably work in teams where we all kind of work with the same types of people. And what I've found in my career, I've been in tech for about 10 years now. What I've found is that, there's a lot of fun to be cross-functional, and it's really interesting, and it really helps our understanding of a business to be cross-functional. And so part of the reason for this is just personal experiences and things that I've experienced in my own role, being in charge of sales, marketing, and partnership type related activities, but needing to interact with Wesley or needing to interact with people at our company. Well, that's a whole nother deal altogether, to be completely clear. But needing to interact with technical people and understanding that our jobs are not at all the same, right? And what we do is not the same. But a lot of times our companies are all shooting for the same end goal, which is to grow revenue, to have good, happy customers. Even if you work internally, right, you're serving other parts of the business that don't think like you or that don't do the same types of things as you. So that was really the main driver for creating this presentation, because I thought it might be kind of interesting. I will say that when I click on share screen, it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Yep, no, Zoom is stupid.
And I'm not the most technical, but at the same time, I know my way around a share button. All right, let's see.
The amount of people I talk to that can't find the share button is a little too high.
That's true. Okay, let's see. Desktop. 1, 2.
We need to start a chime call, folks.
God no. Even we love Amazon, and we
Chime is the worst product Amazon's ever.
Can you see my screen with the presentation?
Are you done?
No, actually, we can't.
You're still pinned. I think you.
Oh, that yeah.
Derp.
1 second. I'm doing stupid stuff. Oh, try and share again.
All right, let's see.
Don't call the IT department.
Every one of us is IT.
Yeah, but we
yeah. If you guys don't know, then we're really screwed.
You said it's a multi-share?
I said it for this.
Yeah, it's probably not what you wanted. So what you would do is 1, and then all participants. Oh, that should be. You should be able to share from that. If he's a guest.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. We got it. You're sharing all of Chrome.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's fine. I'm okay with that. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. And it says, damn it, I hate this mouse. I'm turning this off. It auto scrolls. It's the weirdest thing. Okay, so you can see my presentation, how technology and business oriented teammates find synergy, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, today's November 1st, right?
Maybe.
We're on a good start. Okay, so I am Evan Bissonette. I'm the director of the growth team. Real quick, the growth team is a combination of sales, marketing, and partnerships. It's how we sort of operated those 3 departments under one umbrella for the past 2 years, sorry. I've been here since November of 2020, so I'm almost like officially here for 2 years in about like a week or so. I've been in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I understand you guys are in Knoxville. It's the wrong town, but that's okay. Since 1988. I've been in sales and marketing roles for 12, 13 years, something like that. I've been doing this for a while. I've actually been in technology since 2014. So technology is not something that's completely brand new to me, either in sales or marketing roles. I am devoted to learning something new every day. I know that sounds really like cliche, but it is actually true. I'm also very passionate about volunteering and mentoring students, especially in high school and college. My favorite video game series of all time, which I assume you all play video games, maybe that's the wrong assumption, but I feel safe assuming you all play video games. Metal Gear franchise, 100%. I'm a big Hideo Kojima guy, and I always have been. And my favorite game right now is Cyberpunk 2077, but I want to be clear, not on launch day. That was an absolute shit show. I do play it on PlayStation 5. I'm a console guy, and I've been playing it now recently, and it's much more of a good experience than it was before, to be clear. Also, I have a wife, two kids, 4 and 17 months, and I have a dog named Lambo, like the car, not the field in Green Bay. So
Do you race it with the BMW?
it's a Mercedes. Wesley, I would not assume that you would know anything about me at this point, but it is a Mercedes. I have an SL500 as my weekend car. It's a 1998 SL500 with 43,000 miles. So there's that. I wanted to define tech roles versus business roles. I know that seems like kind of obvious, but at the end of the day, you know, you've got your cloud engineers and your architects and things, your sysadmins, which are the greatest, right? I think this group is about sysadmins. But I'm sure you guys do everything, right? Network admin, service tech, cloud engineers, etc. You've got your tech roles, and then you got your business role, right? Ops managers, sales coordinators, marketing managers, biz development people, really most of the C-level, right? Finance and accounting, people like that. And then you've got your middle ground roles, at least how we look at them, which is solutions architects, project managers, etc. Those are kind of the people that bridge the gap, hence the picture of the bridge, right, between the gap, in case that wasn't obvious. And the idea is we all have specific roles we have to play, right? Whether it's, you know, whether you're actively deploying things for customers, whether you're an internal part of the IT team or technology team, and you've got to do things that help, you know, your particular role. But at the end of the day, you also work with other parts of the business. And at the end of the day, these parts of the business are also important. What I've found after 9 or 10 years in technology is that sometimes tech roles or business roles get mad at each other, right? Even like sales and marketing get mad at each other, right? But sometimes business people get mad at tech people and tech people get mad at business people. And at the end of the day, the reason for coming up with this presentation is that those two things are not meant to be at odds with each other. They're obviously doing different types of roles. They obviously work very differently. They have different personalities, different communication styles, etc. But at the end of the day, you know, and I'm using StratusGrid as an example. StratusGrid is a service-oriented company. We do professional services. We used to do some managed services, but we're still a customer service organization. We're still a sales and marketing organization. And so it's really so important that we keep our customers happy, right? And so when I work with Wesley, for example, it's important that he understands, right, that if our customers are unhappy, our company cannot succeed. At the same time, if I'm in sales and marketing and I'm expecting Wesley to do something that I am asking him to do, I have to understand that that's not his main role, right, at the end of the day. And so there's always this sort of tension that happens between these two. And I'm not even saying that this is between Wesley and I think Wesley and I are pretty well on the same page about this, but I have noticed after 10 years of doing this that there is some opportunity to bridge the gap between those two organizations. And it's not just up to SAs and project managers to do that. So I wanted to kind of define what I meant by the difference between these roles. Why can't we all just get along? Well, the truth is, it's really not about not getting along, right? At the end of the day, sales and technical roles are very different. And sales roles or marketing roles and technical roles serve very different purposes. And it's not really about not getting along, but I would say that it's about not understanding each other's roles and the importance of each other's roles. Sales and marketing teammates, for example, are not technical often, right? You might find the rare unicorn that has a pretty decent understanding of technology. But for the most part, sales and marketing people are not technical at all. And in fact, I would argue that they're not supposed to be. I think they're supposed to be selling and marketing things. I think they're supposed to be simplifying concepts, because a lot of things in the tech space are super complex. And I would say jargon heavy, right? There's a lot of acronyms and a lot of jargon that's used in the tech space, and it's really hard to learn all that. And I think the goal of sales and marketing in tech, for example, is to simplify these things. Conversely, engineers, developers, architects, people that are in technical roles are not supposed to be business interested, right? They're not necessarily supposed to be trained on business and sales marketing concepts. They should be building products, they should be coming up with solutions, and they should be ensuring that whatever we're building and coming up with are good for customers. So they're just not the same role, right? And sometimes I think I'm speaking from like a marketing and sales standpoint, right? I think we assume that technical people care about sales and marketing and vice versa, right? I think there's an assumption made sometimes that technical people care about sales and marketing, and that sales and marketing people care about technical aspects of jobs, right?
Would you be better off though if they were cross-trained better?
100%. I mean, at the end of the day,
Sales and marketing, it doesn't understand the product, it's not really a good sales and marketing person.
Sure they are.
And an engineer that doesn't develop a marketable product is not really good.
You're 100% right, and I'm so glad that you're like speaking up, and I encourage everyone to speak up. This is not meant to be me talking at you guys. I'm glad you said that, but I 100% agree. At the end of the day, if sales and marketing people and technical people are not on the same page about why they're there to begin with, right? Which is technical people got to develop. I mean, so my first job out of college was to be a manufacturing marketing rep, right? So I actually worked for a manufacturer. There's very little difference between manufacturing and technology, right? Ultimately, you're developing things, you're creating things that are marketed as the best solution, right? Sometimes, or they're saying, or it might just be a Me Too product, right? Which is like several examples of the same type of thing in the industry. And a lot of times companies build products or services that are the very best, but they don't necessarily understand like that there's a market for it, right? So the example there is, let's build a product or solution that nobody's actually asking for, and then be really mad at ourselves when like, oh, we can't sell this because nobody wants it. But you're not actually understanding that at the end of the day, if you don't have a market for it, if you don't understand the market aspect of it, like you're just wasting time, right? So I think the point is 100% valid that salespeople should understand what the other teams are doing, and the technical team should understand what sales and marketing are doing, to a degree, right? I also think, it's crazy. There's a lot of sales training out there that actually says that the more technical a salesperson becomes, the worse they are at selling things, just to be clear. Which I think is actually kind of an interesting concept. But if you read the book, it's from Sandler Training. It's how to teach a kid to ride a bike or you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. And the idea is that you can be knowledgeable enough, and you want to sell to a degree where you're knowledgeable, but if you get too knowledgeable, you actually become a worse salesperson. And speaking from experience being in technology for 10 years, I think there's a lot of truth to that. There's a reason that essays are essays and salespeople are salespeople, right? Essays are designed to understand solutions and technology and figure out a way to make that work for like an end user or customer. And the salesperson just has to understand how to get them to commit to that product or solution. So there's still a degree of separation between the salesperson and the essay in that example.
So, Evan, question. Is there a way that we should probably be thinking about how to kind of constantly communicate with the sales team on what potential customer asks might be, rather than saying, oh, they asked for this, but like maybe a process for that?
I mean, I think it really depends on the company. I think it depends on how you guys are structured, right? I know how we're structured, Wesley, but at the end of the day, you know, different companies are different. If you're mostly like working for an organization, and you're an internal team, then it's totally different than if you're like a services company and everything you guys are doing or what you're selling, right? So that I think it really totally depends on the situation, but I think we might get into that in future slides.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you though. So then what's the issue, right? Why is this such an issue? And I think it's these are some potential scenarios that I've actually heard in some form or fashion, not necessarily word for word. It's hard to focus on things we're not being held accountable for. That literally goes both ways, right? It's just as possible that somebody in sales or marketing is going to be completely disinterested in something that's happening on the technical side as the opposite, right? Where somebody on the technical side is not understanding the importance of something on the sales and marketing side, because ultimately maybe you're not metriced on that, maybe you're not even incentivized on that. Like you don't get paid any extra money if you do that, so it doesn't really matter, right? Like at the end of the day. The other team should just have to figure it out. This is a really common thought process. Sales and marketing is not technical, but maybe they should just take time to learn more, right? Maybe they should just be more technical at this point. But the opposite could be said, you know, as well. Technical person, maybe you should just understand sales and marketing better, right? But the reality is that's not really what we're talking about here. I want to help, but when I submit content to marketing, they just edit the shit out of it. Wesley might have experiences recently with blog post entry.
Yeah, like 3 hours ago.
Yeah, I saw you send that over, but I've been at this conference all day, you know, so you should just figure it out. No, not really. See what I did there? I want to help, but the technical teams just really don't understand what we're looking for, right? Like I hear this all the time. There's a lot of tenets about communication where like this is a communication altruism. Like ultimately, if you're communicating to somebody, the onus is not on them to understand what you're communicating. The onus is on you to make sure they understand. Like that's a basic tenet of communication. And so the idea is that if the technical team doesn't understand what we're looking for, that's on me to make sure a Wesley or somebody in this circumstance actually understands what I'm looking for, not for Wesley to understand what I'm asking him for. Again, it's hard to talk to those technical people. It's hard to talk to those sales and marketing people. So then what's the issue? People. Ultimately, people are the issue here, right? We have different roles. We have different outcomes. We have different expectations, and people are very different. And so it becomes very hard to understand what the other person is working on. And we fight, you know, we don't mean to, but we fight. And so how do we fix this? Sorry, I'm trying to scroll and I can't. There we go. So the next few slides. So the next two slides are from a business team perspective. All right. When I get to the two slides after that, it's really more from people in your type of role perspective. And so I've got a few observations that I've made, but I'm actually going to ask you to add your own thoughts to this. Like at the end of the day, I can speak on this from a business standpoint. I can't necessarily speak on this from a technical standpoint, but I can talk about what I've observed over the past 8 or 10 years, right? But for the business team, and in this case, business team is anyone that's not in a technical role, anyone that's not an engineer, anyone that's not a developer or architect or whatever, right? So what works for the business team is to be communicating expectations. So for example, if I'm like, let's just use an example. Let's say I need to write a case study. And it would be one thing for me to BS a case study from the beginning to end and say, this is super important that we talk about this customer and include this customer's logo. And we talk about all the different projects that we've taken on with this customer. And you should think that's important because this is, you know, a big logo, that everybody knows, right? But then the technical person is like, well, yeah, but I don't like, what am I supposed to provide here, right? Like, it can't just be fluff. It can't just be nonsense, right? And so if I don't sit you down and say, hey, Wesley, hey, somebody on our team, we're going to do a case study about this particular customer. And the reason that this is important is because we're trying to build, so StratusGrid as an entity is focused on supply chain and logistics as one of our industry niches. If I don't say like, this customer is in supply chain and what we've done for them is really unique and this would be a really compelling story, then you don't understand the importance of it, right? You're just like, I'm not going to do this. I've got all these other things I got to do. I've got tickets, I've got incentives that are completely not aligned with the outcome of this deliverable, right? But if I say on the front end, hey, it's really important that we do this because of the importance for supply chain and logistics as an industry, and this is a really compelling thing, and I think this is going to help us grow our business and make more revenue, then at least you can get behind it. And at least you can kind of say, oh, I understand why that's important, right? Another thing that we do here, at least we try to do here, is we start with a basic outline or structure. So if it's something that, I mean, you guys aren't writing, deep thinking, like, marketing pieces all day long. So if we're expecting you to come up with something that's going to help us grow the business, the least we could do is provide a basic outline or structure. Again, answer why we're doing it, why it's important. Setting clear outcomes and timelines. I think a lot of times sales and marketing will reach out to an organization and they'll say, hey, we really need this. And that's all they say. Hey, we really need this. And so to me, like it's more of a partnership if we are saying, we need this and we need this in 2 weeks. And the reason that we need this in 2 weeks is because we have a trade show coming up in 3 weeks. And we really want to have this piece of content available so that we can sell kind of the success that we've had to this point. And so making it an open-ended request is something that works, right? Not making it an open-end, not making it something that is just like, yeah, finish it whenever you get to it. After the person that you're working with is committed to doing it, you can also check in from time to time and treat it like a miniature project with project management, right? It's important to remember, for example, when I make a request of Wesley or somebody on our team, it's not their primary place of work. So there's not something that, tells them every day, I need to work, 2 hours a day on this case study until it's done. And then obviously, I know this sounds really, really obvious, but showing gratitude and realizing that this is definitely something that this person is adding to and providing value to is important. Because I think that we as people inside of our organizations get to be cliquish. We create our own teams. We sort of stick to our people that we're close with, and we don't always recognize that people on our teams are possibly working on things that they don't necessarily think of as something they have to do, but something they want to do to try to improve the business. So showing gratitude and support is incredibly important. What doesn't work in this case is lobbing something over the fence and not checking in, not ensuring that the technical teammate has all their information that they need to be successful. Telling the tech teammate, hey, just do this because you should care, right? That doesn't work very well. I've tried that for a while in the past. And most of the time it's like, well, it's not that I don't care. It's just that I don't have time, right? And I think it's important to recognize that. But if somebody commits to something, not helping them pay attention to the timelines and not treating it as important is definitely a recipe for failure. Just being frustrated and impatient, if something pops up in the work queue. So for example, if I request something from Wesley in this example, and I'm not picking on Wesley, but I do work with him. If I ask something of Wesley and he literally just doesn't think it's important, that's one thing. But if he's like, hey, I have worked on this, but I literally can't do any more of this until next week. Like if I'm not understanding of that, then that really just sort of misses the point. And then moving the goalpost if the tech teammate meets the original request. So for example, it's on me as the person who's not in the tech world to come up with a list of requirements or expectations for like the end deliverable. And if somebody actually delivers on a deliverable, but they don't but then I say, you know what, never mind. I think this actually misses the mark. This isn't what I was looking for. That's on me, frankly, right? Again, it's that tenet of communication. If I don't set the expectation in the beginning about what you should expect, then it's on me to like, make sure that you understand. And if you don't understand, then frankly, I failed in my communication of the sort of eventual outcome. And so, what works for the technical team? Again, I'm being careful here because I'm not a technical person, but I do think that I've observed enough that if you're asking a lot of questions when you're planning a project, right? Whether it's a case study or use case or something. If you're not asking questions and you're just saying, yeah, you're right, I've got this, I'll be fine, right? Then I have to assume that you have a full understanding of the request. And if you don't have a full understanding of the request, then it's kind of on you, right? At the end of the day. If you're adhering to a proposed timeline, for example, and you're managing expectations ahead of time that is going to be delayed, that's fine. But if you're like, hey, I'm going to do this, and then you're like, yeah, but it's really not that important, so I'm going to do it in like 60 days from when I said I would, and I'll get to it when I get to it. I don't think that's good for the business, and it really is not good for your interdepartmental, camaraderie, for lack of a better term. And if you're working hard and being thorough on the task and you're not treating it like something that you shouldn't have to do, that can only lead to more success. But again, these are all things that are a little bit broad. What are specific things that you guys think technical teammates who are being asked by a sales or marketing teammate, for example, to produce should be focused on that would be more likely to have success for the business overall?
Where's the caffeine and the alcohol?
And incentives are 100% important, and they're very real, to be clear. Wesley understands the concept of incentives. You guys have probably had desserts from Wesley in the past, so you guys understand as well. But no, it's
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did it one time here. Dang it,
well,
Evan.
never mind. They're horrible. You wouldn't like them.
No, so Evan, one thing for me on the first one, you already kind of covered it, but I like to just break it down to basics and say basically, so what you're expecting me to do, and just list it as, explain it to me like I'm 5, and that's what I want to list it back as, just to make sure I do understand, since we're on 2 different playing fields.
I mean, I like to have a procedure in place to know what happens when details get left off. Like, how are you going to handle something critical getting missed through either discovery or when you're in the middle of the project and there's this thing that comes out of left field that should have been caught either in the initial walkthrough? Like, there should be at least something in place to be able to handle that. Because if you're working with somebody you don't know how they're going to respond to that, that's a huge problem that gets even worse. So like some sort of procedure in place for, if the client misrepresents something or forgets to tell you something important that doesn't get asked during the scope, creation process, or if you end up with scope creep, all that needs to be addressed in a policy and procedure in place before you really get into it.
I think that's a good point, because I think, if we're just looking at this as like an opportunity, like a sales opportunity, right? Sometimes you have situations where somebody does something like that, right? They say something that's like, whoa, hey, you didn't mention that, right? And what's interesting is, I'm not saying that all organizations do this, and I don't even think our organization does this, but if something like that happens, it's kind of easy to be like, well, the SA didn't ask the right questions, right? Or the salesperson didn't qualify the opportunity. And ultimately that doesn't help anybody, right? Like, at the end of the day, sales and marketing and the technical teams, they all work for the same company. And so if the opportunity is lost, the opportunity is lost. It doesn't matter who lost it, frankly. So I do think that's quite an interesting addition, especially around like developing opportunities, right? But even if it's a project, I think that's also relevant, because if you have an opportunity and it's like a case study and you really want to hammer home a point about a case study, right? And the customer's like, well, Yeah, no, I mean, this part of it was pretty cool, right? But then the truth of the matter is that customer left off the fact that that part of it was actually like the thing that made the case study interesting, which happens, right? Um, then that's not really, I mean, it's not really a blame game, right? And I think that that's another part of this is it's not a blame situation. It's really just an opportunity to tell a story about a customer or something. And it's really on both or all involved teams, whether it's operations or sales or PM or whatever, to develop that opportunity in that way. So I that's a good ad. What else? Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, maybe templates or examples or, something you can refer to rather than, just relying on the technical person to ask questions, right? If you can show them something concrete that they can build their ideas off of.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you don't want to hold their hand, but at the same time, you do want to create some sort of a structure. You want to create something that's repeatable because ultimately, as we said earlier in this presentation, there's some parts of this that are just not. It's not that the person that's on the technical team or the sales and marketing doesn't care about what the opposite person is doing, but it's not their daily concern, or they might not be incentivized or metriced on that particular output, right? So at the end of the day, it has to be as short and simple and straightforward as possible so that this person can kind of say, okay, well, I want to be useful to this sales and marketing person that's asking me to create this, but I also don't want to be distracted from doing my day to day. Right. So I also think those are some good ads. Anything else? Cool. What doesn't work? Not engaging and asking questions, right? If you are in a situation where somebody's saying, hey, do you have any other questions? Do you have any requirements here? And you don't ask anything, that's on you, right? If you're not participating in the project once you've committed to it, in other words, if you say you're going to do it and you just don't do it, that's not a recipe for success, right? Same thing on the sales and marketing side. And also not sticking to timelines or communicating that you will be delayed, right? At the end of the day, timelines are important. And especially, when hopefully we can assume that if somebody's assigning a timeline to something, it's important. And so if you say you're going to do it and you just keep pushing it off, keep saying it's not important, then that's not a recipe for success. But from a more technical standpoint, is there anything else that we should add to this? What doesn't work for technical teammates when it comes to interacting with sales and marketing and other parts of the business when it comes to developing?
Not proving out assumptions.
Not proving out assumptions, is that what we said?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a fair one too. I mean, I like the phrase when you assume the gas out of you and me. So
Because from tech side, we have certain expectations about what is reasonable and possible and the way things are traditionally done, either within the tools we're working with or the industry we work in. And the customer may not share those, and the marketing and sales groups may not be aware of that disconnect. And so there's a huge area for misinterpretation there.
we're able to hear that, Evan.
What's that?
You able to hear that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm just absorbing.
For example, if the customer's assumption of an API is an FTP server that they periodically upload a file to.
It's wrong.
I
know, and he said
Has everyone in IT had that same experience? Yeah, we support APIs. Yeah, it's FTP. No.
Yeah.
It's a really common business pattern because it mimics we're going to just send this by mail to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to them and their data entry staff to pull it out in whatever form we send it in and carry on. You're virtualizing, digitizing those processes. And the underlying human interactions haven't changed. A former employer did a shocking amount of their business this way.
Yeah, 100%. Anything else? What doesn't work?
So
this may not go well with this slide, but I think one thing, especially marketing coming to tech, is just being very transparent about who the audience is, and your expectations. You had something to that effect, but knowing the audience controls a lot of what we would include, right? You're telling me this is something that would go to like a CEO or something. I'm going to be a lot fluffier on details than if you tell me this is presented to the client's tech team.
Mm-hmm. That's 100% accurate. If the marketing person in this case is not describing who this is going to be presented to, it becomes really hard to expect the person that's writing the technical aspects of this to kind of write it in the right way. Now, there still might be some back and forth after that, right? Maybe something is said in a technical way and you're like, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say this any other way. This is just the way that it's described. You might have to work with a marketing person to like soften it even more in certain circumstances, right? But I actually think that's super valid. If you're not even giving the person kind of the target market and the target audience, then I would say that the sales and marketing person in this case is not providing the right insights into why you're developing a certain content piece or whatever it is.
So, Evan, something to ride along Brandon's point there, more for customer call related. One thing that doesn't work is you just get pulled into it at the very last minute. And you don't have any prep on it. So like, I know, and kind of on the contrary, what does work is I know salespeople will have their essays like, Andy, I'm sure Andy's not here right now. I'm sure Andy's in the situation a lot to where he has certain sales engineers that he works with salespeople that he works with. But also knowing when to say, I'm not the qualified person to answer that and deflect it to someone else on the call.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else on what doesn't work?
Probably should go more on the other team side, but not last minuting the tech folks. You know, I know that's kind of real vague, but there's a pattern that I've seen at other places and in a former place, current place, where there will be a project in motion for months or a customer engagement in motion for months, and there'll be no advisory given. So when the customer finally executes, some weird, interesting request that's not been filtered or validated comes in on an extremely tight timetable. And that probably goes under, general communications and, be talking to your other teams. But it seems to happen a lot more than it has any right to. I would imagine that such a thing should only really happen between given pair of teams maybe once.
So I agree with you. I also think there are certain circumstances where there might be a reason to move faster. However, the person that's making that request has to explain why. It can't just be a situation where it's like, move faster on this just because this is important, right? But if there's a market condition that says we need to have another case study or two on supply chain and logistics because we're about to go to a very high visibility trade show where people are going to ask us for examples of customers that we've worked with, then that should be made, that should be entered into the discussion. And then if the person commits to doing that and they have the time and ability to deliver on that, then they should do that, right? But I definitely agree that that should be the exception, not the rule, right? It shouldn't be like, oh, sorry, I waited too long to actually request the case study on this, but now we need one and we're 2 weeks behind, right? That's not fair to the organization. That's not fair to the teammates that are working on it. But at the same time, like I said, I think it's important to mention that there are circumstances where the business, marketing, for example, might request something that's kind of last minute, but if they can explain why it's important that we get it to people last minute, and get the buy-in from the technical people that are going to write it, that it's important to go ahead and like stick to that timeline. If that makes
that kind of to build on what he said is that in the perfect world where this all happens, where you find out about it, it's got a short fuse and you've got to light that fuse and get it done, right? It should be, in a lot of cases, in my opinion, on the person that's requesting the time from engineering to work with their management so that they're reprioritized when you bring this task to them. Because many times this happens to me and other people that I know where we get this really like, hey, I've had stuff with 4-hour fuses, right? And then I'm in the middle of another fire, but I don't know what my priority is. So then I spend an hour trying to figure out what my priority is, but I could have been spending that time actually doing the work. So it's sort of like, basically here what I'm saying is that if you're bringing a short fuse, already have discussed it with all the proper management players so that reprioritization has already been discussed so that when you come, you're ready to help the person reprioritize their existing work. But I don't know many engineers that have a lot of discretion.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. 100%.
And there is kind of a backside of this in that, you still want to, you know, from the tech side, you want to return to marketing fairly quickly, or your internal customer fairly quickly to manage and set expectations. That's kind of already up there though. Because otherwise they'll assume either A, you flaked out on them, you're not going to do it, or B, you've already done it.
Yep. No, I agree. That's totally reasonable. 100%. Okay. So this is like one of my last slides. Recently, part of the StratusGrid content schedule this year has been to generate blogs, and a lot of our blogs are kind of fed to us by technical teammates. I will say this, like, just this is a StratusGrid specific statement. StratusGrid is the most like engaged when it comes to technical content of any tech organization that I've worked for 9 or 10 years. Matt Barlow is a perfect example. We had a lot of blog posts that went out this year that were technically minded, right? That were created by technical people, that were worked on in collaboration with the sales and marketing team, especially marketing, right? And we did 12 plus just that were technical, right? Everything else was maybe a business blog or something, or about a news announcement or something like that around StratusGrid. We asked the technical people on our team to submit the content on a schedule, right? So basically they committed to the content. They said, yes, absolutely, I'll provide that content. We set the expectation that it needed to be written for an audience that was not just going to be super technical, right? So it had to be something that was at least generic and interesting enough that it was like fairly easy to understand, right? We collaborated with each of the people that were authoring this content to make sure it met the right messaging and the marketing voice, but also still met the technical and business needs that we had set in mind. And as a result of taking this approach, we've got a cloud infrastructure lead here on our team named Matt Barlow, who was able to create specific blog content that we posted on our website that he submitted to, and I don't know anyone who's familiar with the AWS Ambassador Program, but it says here, there's only about 250 globally individual people that have actually like applied for this and received the AWS Ambassador thing. And because we were able to collaborate with Matt, and he sort of got on this cadence and he sort of understood the importance of it, not just for himself, but also for the business, he was able to become an AWS ambassador, which was, again, 250 people globally. That's a big deal, right? That's a small amount of people that are providing content in that way. And I think this is a good example, right, of something that was really good for Matt as the AWS ambassador to kind of win this recognition. But it was also good for StratusGrid as an organization and as a brand to create content that people could understand as technical, but also interesting and useful. And so that's just sort of a success story that I think if we follow this approach can create some really good synergy between technical and business related people, which was ultimately the overall point of this presentation. So that's basically all I had. This was able to fill up a lot more time than I thought it would, so I'm pretty proud of myself. But what kind of questions do you guys have, or comments? You know, it doesn't have to be questions, but just curious what you guys think about this relationship that a lot of us probably experience on a regular basis.
So I'm curious, from having done a little bit of both sides of the house, it sounds like you're in more of a sales marketing role right now. What's the biggest annoyance of working with tech people for you?
You can't say me.
Is this Wesley?
No, that's Brandon asking.
Oh, okay. Can I be real transparent?
Go for it.
Okay. One of the most frustrating aspects of working with technical people is a concept that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, and it's called tech bullying. And it's a real thing. I've worked with technical people that assume I should understand a super complex topic of a technical nature. And the reality is that's not my job, right? My job is to take complex concepts and try to simplify them as best I can in a way that people actually care about. And for the person that just came back in, right? Like the most complex part of working with technical people is sometimes that they are really smart and they are really capable and they understand a lot about technical concepts. But that doesn't mean, right, that they can unintentionally, most likely, right? There's probably some people out there who do it on purpose, right? But most likely it's an unintentional concept that people are sharing information in a way that says, I know this, you don't, I'm more important than you because I know this information. But at the end of the day, that person also doesn't understand how to sell something, how to market something, and how to move the needle from like a revenue standpoint necessarily, right? So again, this is a partnership between two parts of the business that are completely different, and they're not expected to know the same things, but they are expected to work together and all be moving towards growing the business, because a lot of us, I'm pretty sure all of us work for companies that have to gain revenue, and if they don't gain revenue, then they're not very successful. If that makes sense. But yeah, tech bullying is definitely a thing.
At the end of the day, one can't exist without the other.
Sure, and sales and marketing bullying is probably a thing too. I don't do that. I don't think. Maybe I do. Wesley could answer that. But it's definitely, you know, there are people who are like, well, you don't understand how to sell anything, so what do you know, right? That's not the answer here, right? The answer is we got to work together. We're both playing an important role, and we're playing roles that are very different, and that's 100% the way that it should be, right? So hopefully that answers the question, but that's definitely something that after 10 years, I've experienced it enough that I'm like, yeah, that's definitely a thing that I experience, and it makes it a little challenging, right? To work with people that you know are really smart in some areas, but that don't necessarily value what you bring to the table either. So
It goes both ways.
100%.
So kind of flipping the script and adding a little onto that, what's something that you keep running into that you know that you're used to and is just kind of common knowledge in your side of the house that you're often surprised that tech side has no concept of or no understanding of?
This might be a little nuanced. This might be nuanced.
Nuance is what I'm fishing for here.
I'm putting on my sales hat. Okay. Not my marketing hat, and I can wear both. But
You have the hat literally next to you. You actually put it on.
I have a few hats near me actually. I'm gonna put on my AWS hat. No, so I think, so let me repeat the question. The question was, sorry, say the question one more time so I make sure that I'm 100% answering what I think you're asking.
What's something that you're familiar with from the sales and marketing side, and that you believe is generally well known in the sales and marketing side, that you are often surprised that tech side has no idea or concept of?
Okay. Here's an example. I know from doing this for 10, 12 years that sales is really, really difficult. Like the job of sales, if you're good at it, is very hard. There's a lot of salespeople that are bad at it, and those are the people that we make fun of, right? But doing sales the right way, doing it correctly, and being a good, partner to customers and making sure that you're actually solving their problems is very hard to do in 2022. And it's because there's a ridiculous amount of information available to people to learn the wrong way to do something. And then when you're having conversations about sales, they're like, oh no, I read online that you could just do your EC2 and blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, no, you can't do that. That's not how this works. And so it's really, really difficult to convey to customers that sales it's really about solving problems, right? And it used to be about, going door to door and just like finding the right price and calling it a day. But sales is very difficult. And I think a lot of people on the technical side think that it's really just a matter of playing with numbers and getting people to commit to stuff, right? And it's really not that simple anymore. And in fact, I would even say that people in tech sales, if they're trying to sell without bringing in a technical person, they're doing things the wrong way. Like if they're trying to sell things on their own 100% and then like throwing it over the fence to the technical team, it's not going to go well. Either that customer is not going to get what they paid for, or they're not going to get the actual output that they thought they were going to get. And so it's not going to work. And so sales is very collaborative these days. And so it is incumbent on the technical team to understand to at least some degree how sales works in 2022 and beyond. So that's one thing about business and about sales that I think is a little surprising, is that everyone just assumes sales is just like the last thing like that gets in the way of people actually making a decision to work with a particular company. Additionally, I think that there's an assumption that some parts of marketing are not valuable if they're not generating leads. And I think the reality is the buyers of today are a lot more complex and a lot more mature than they used to be. And so they do have a lot of information at their fingertips. And so if they're making assumptions about just how simple it is and just how, social media doesn't matter and everything else, I think that's a mistake. At the same time, like it's also important not to waste time and to spin wheels on things that don't actually generate interest and do generate leads. So it's this weird like 50-50 approach to business that is not always straightforward. So I don't know. That's probably a little bit deeper of a subject than we have time for, considering I have 1 minute left, but it's a great question for sure.
Hey, so if you listed Cyberpunk as your favorite, have you watched Edge Runners?
I've been on 2 episodes in. Yeah, so I really like it actually. You know what I love about Cyberpunk is that this is how ridiculous I am with Cyberpunk. I literally played it on PS4 Pro all the way through when it first launched.
Why do you hate yourself so much?
Exactly. And I literally saved, I didn't even think about it. I saved every 30 seconds to a minute. Like, yeah, because I was like, I don't want to lose my progress, but this game is amazing, potentially. And I was like, I'm not going to lose my progress. But I literally completed the game all the way through. But it literally crashed like 35 times. And now that it's on PS5, it's way more stable. It's a great game. And it took a while for it to be a great game, but it is actually now quite a great game. But we can talk about Metal Gear all day long. I mean, that's the greatest game series of all
I mean,
time.
how did
What's
you
your
feel?
favorite game in the Metal Gear franchise?
It's definitely Metal Gear Solid, just because that's the game that kind of started it for me as far as um, you know, stealth in a game. Like your job is not necessarily to go in and just blow everybody up. Your job is to sneak around and actually get through without engaging with anybody at all.
PlayStation 1 or?
PlayStation 1, and in fact, I want them to come out with a remake of some kind. I still am holding out hope for some sort of a movie, which had been promised for like the past 10 years. But I just think Hideo Kojima is an absolute genius storyteller, and he's done some things with video games that, you know, my wife doesn't understand them. If I start talking, I'm glad you guys care about video games, because like I don't get to talk about video games that much.
I can ask
My
you
wife,
about Revengeance.
what's that?
Revengeance?
Revengeance, the Metal Gear like combined thing, is that what you're talking about?
I maybe remember the title wrong. So when follows Raiden.
Ryzen? The one where you play as Raiden with
Yeah,
the
where'd
sword.
they get
Oh.
Revengeance from?
On
Well, I was
on
thinking of Metal Slug for some reason.
no, that's different. That's different. No, that's different. That's Konami too, though, I think.
Oh, I got the names and the games mixed up.
Yeah. But yeah. Well, I hope this was interesting. You know, I think we're over time, but I hope this was interesting. This is probably not what you guys are usually exposed to, but I did have here my contact info. So if you have any additional questions or follow up, or you're just like, yeah, I need you to talk to my sales and marketing person because they don't understand like what you're saying right now. Like I do understand, right? I do understand that this is not something that's normal. I can't go to Wesley and be like, Wesley, I need a case study. I need it in 3 days, and I need you to drop everything else that you're doing and only work on this case study. First of all, he's going to tell me to fuck off, right? But at the same time, he should, right? Like that's not the way that this should be approached. This is a collaboration. This is something that we both should be doing together because it's better for the business. But it can't be something that I just lob over to him and say, "Hey, you're on your own. Please figure it out."
Hey,
Right? And yeah,
the funny thing is, Dan asked me to do that like 6 months ago, and I completely bullshitted it. And he said this is one of the best things ever.
listen, even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while, Wesley. So kudos to you for
Do you
being that
also
blind
get
squirrel.
confused for StratusGrid?
What's that?
Do you often get confused with StratusGrid?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the whole thing. It's funny, we actually have AWS people call us that sometimes. And I'm just like, I love you guys, but it's right there in the name. Like that's important, right? Call people by their names. Well, like I said, I hope this was interesting. Please feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions or comments, or literally if you would just want to say, hey, I relate to this and fuck those sales and marketing people. I get that. It is what it is.
I want to kill the recording now on it.
Okay, cool.